Want to know why? Ask how. Howard the Humongous. At the Republican convention at the end of August, speaker after speaker ranted that if Joe Biden wins the American presidential election, violence will take over the streets and reach you wherever you are. It will be the end of American society. This is utterly false, but the Trumpists are not the only ones who feel that we are standing on the brink of an apocalypse. And Trump's fantasies about Joe Biden are not the only reasons some think that Armageddon is upon us. There is also the COVID pandemic and predictions of a global warming that we are told might obliterate the human race, not to mention what some prophesy as the inevitable collapse of capitalism. The world as we know it is over, we are told, and we are told that from both the right and the left. Western civilization, we are told, is in its death throes, and extremists on the left say that Western civilization deserves to die. According to its critics, Western civilization is the most violent civilization in the history of mankind. It's the only civilization to produce 2 world wars, the nuclear bombing of 2 cities, imperialism, and colonialism. In the next 12 months, it's all going to fall apart. It's all going to implode. It's going to collapse upon itself. The result, some feel, will be a world of greater justice. The result, others feel, will be a dog-eat-dog and human-eat-human world, the ultimate nightmare, the ultimate dystopia. All of this is false. The collapse of Western civilization in the face of COVID, climate change, and Trump is unlikely. We've been through even scarier times, and we've survived. Put yourself in the mind of an average American intellectual in 1918. You would have been absolutely convinced that capitalism and the civilization of the West were about to disintegrate. Why? We had just been through the greatest nightmare in history, World War I. The first war to bog young men down in trenches where artillery shells rained from the sky and exploded above your head, rocketing down shrapnel that could rip you apart. Trenches that could be attacked by mustard gas, a poison gas that could leave you blind. Trenches from which taking just 7 miles of ground could take 5 months and cost 1 million lives. A war in which nearly 20,000 men could die in just one battle in just one afternoon. The first war in which 20 million civilians would die. That's twice as many as all the humans alive on the planet Earth in 10,000 BC, when we invented agriculture and cities. Surely the horrors of World War I alone should have been enough to finish off Western civilization, shouldn't they? Then came 1917, a revolution in Russia, a revolution that ousted capitalism utterly and replaced it with a communism that many thought would lead to a new paradise, to a whole new kind of justice and equality on Earth. According to Marxism, capitalism was on its last legs, and according to Marxism, the spread of the Russian Revolution worldwide was inevitable. Believers were certain that Karl Marx's science proved that capitalism was about to collapse. And how could Marx possibly have been wrong? The world was mired in recession for 4 years. By 1921, unemployment had soared to nearly 12%. Soldiers who had fought in the war could not find jobs. Yes, men who had been trained to kill in combat were out of work and left jobless by the very society for which they had fought. Revolution seemed the only possible result. Finally, in case the forces of class warfare described by Marx weren't enough to make apocalypse inevitable, God seemed to get into the act. How? The world was hit with the biggest pandemic since the bubonic plague that destroyed up to 60% of the globe's human population in 1347 to 1351. That was the Spanish flu, a virus that lasted 2 years and killed up to 150 million people worldwide. There was no way that capitalism and the Western system could possibly survive these blows, right? Wrong. Consumerism roared back in the early 1920s. There were new clothing styles, new hairstyles, and new technologies, the telephone and the automobile. There was a new music, jazz. There were new dances, the foxtrot, the shimmy, the Charleston, the Turkey Trot, and the Lindy Hop. What was the result? The Roaring Twenties, the era of F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, the era of the flapper. The Western system in capitalism had just gone through a hell more thorough than the one of our era, and they did more than survived. They thrived. Now the big question is, can Western civilization survive a challenge of a whole new kind? The second term of the ultimate liar, the ultimate dictator wannabe, Donald Trump. I hope we don't have to live through another 4 years of Trump to find out. This is Howard the Humongous, speaking to you from the future. It's your job and my job to make. Or, want to know why? Ask how. And now for that infamous, sleazy, slimy, sneaky little off button. It should be about here.